Today I want to discuss the foundational approach to helping patients connect with doctors, and specifically through your Find a Doctor tools. We're going to start with the philosophy of thinking like an e-commerce site, and I want to tell you the reason why is because Google has done some research that shows that within 17 milliseconds of visiting your site, a consumer will form an opinion of your organization and the usability of the site. And where they form that is based on whether or not the site is familiar and intuitive to their experience elsewhere on the web and what they've come to expect. And so you have to ask yourself the question, where do people form these expectations? Well, they don't form them on hospital websites because they don't spend enough time there. So they spend them on e-commerce, social media sites, gaming sites. So we want you to begin to think more like Amazon and begin to think about an e-commerce site and the way that they approach things, from a search interface, from a connection point to the consumer, to have the kind of information that they provide to help them draw in those consumers and help them make an evaluation, compare products, and make a choice. Now, obviously, a Find a Doctor is a little bit different, and one of the things that you've got to contend with is where you get your data. And so, for example, one of the things that we talk about a lot is that credentialing data is not patient-centered Find a Doctor tools, because credentialing has a different business function for what they're trying to accomplish. So being able to have things like their basic contact information, their specialties, the things they're board certified in, and where they went to medical school, these are all things that credentialing cares about. But you have to ask yourself the question, if you were the one who just got diagnosed with a new condition or disease of some sort, what would you want to be able to know about a provider before you chose them as your partner in healthcare to be able to know that they would be the ones for you? And the question you've got to ask yourself then is the data in credentialing enough? You know, if you think about going out and doing a search on the web and finding the kind of data sources that are out there, the reason places like Healthgrades and Vitals and other organizations like that have developed the kind of traffic that they have is because they've begun asking this question and then giving data points to people to help them better make choices. The question is, why don't hospitals do that? And so one of the things that we talk about a lot is that it's marketing's responsibility. It's their business responsibility to go out and find this additional content. And the question is, how do you go about doing that? Now, the other piece of this is that a lot of people look at a Find a Doctor tool as a part of a once and done effort. It's either a technology effort where they go out and build a tool and it's a search interface, and can you search, can you find a doctor's name, can you get their contact information? And the answer to that is sure, that's a once and done sort of effort. But if your goal is, again, to connect patients to the correct provider, that is a much broader question, and that is a much broader project that requires an ongoing optimization. And so again, once and done will not get this accomplished. Now, the question is, where do you start, right? And so the starting point here is beginning to think about, first of all, how are they finding you now, right? So check your analytics and take a look and see, where are people coming from? Are they coming from the web? Because we've seen surveys that show only about 6% of people who are searching for a physician actually come to a hospital website as a resource. But if you look at your analytics, the Find a Doctor tool in most cases that we see is in the top 2 or 3 most trafficked parts of their site. Once you take careers out of the picture, it's generally top 1 or 2 most trafficked parts of your site, which tells you that you don't get a lot of traffic from people who are looking for a doctor, but people who've already found one or already in your system, they're using that tool enormously. So what that means is there's an enormous opportunity to increase the number of people who are using your site to be able to find your doctors. So the question is, how are they finding you now? Also, what are they looking for? Do you know which doctors get the most traffic? What specialties are being searched the most? When people are on other service line pages, are you connecting them back into your physicians? And so you know how many of them are clicking through, because ultimately physicians are the gateway to your organization. So do you know when they're looking at your service information that they're then coming to the providers who can actually bring them into that system? And then finally, what is the best way to connect? So what is the data that they want to have? What is it the best way for them to be able to connect with your organization, whether it be a phone call, whether it be an appointment request form, whether it be online scheduling, which is the holy grail for most organizations, but is a logistical nightmare. So these are the starting point questions. Now, you can get a good beginning point from looking at your analytics. For example, looking at the percentage of your traffic that comes from mobile. We have some clients where mobile has now actually overtaken the amount of traffic that comes from desktops. Different organizations and geographies in the country actually do have more mobile traffic, and this would help you to understand what kind of design you would want to have for your directory to be able to best connect with your patients. The other component is where are they coming from? Are they coming from search engines like Google and Bing? Are they coming from other sites that are referring to your site? Are they coming internally? So is this, they generally tend to come to a service line page or a landing page, and then they transition from there over into the Find a Doctor tool. So you know how they're finding you, how they're getting to you, and how to optimize that process and the steps along the way. The other thing you can look at is the Find a Doctor versus overall. I talked about this a minute ago, but most of our clients find out that their Find a Doctor tool does in the top portion of their traffic. And so this would let you know that, hey, this is an area where we really need to put a lot of focus, and this would actually help your physicians and the other organizations, the other departments in the organization be able to see that they need to be able to put the energy into this, whether it be data sharing, cooperation, budget, etc. The other thing you can look at here is the doctors and specialties. I talked about this a minute ago, but looking and seeing what profiles, what specialties, what search criteria are people putting in, so they can let you know what they're looking for. For example, if you've got a keyword search and they're searching for, the keywords they're searching on are all insurances, maybe they're diseases, maybe they're procedures, whatever they are, this will let you know what they're actually searching for and what they're trying to accomplish. The other thing that you can look at is your data process and workflow. So when you're looking at how your data currently flows in the organization, here's probably what you're going to find. You're going to find that there are various databases that exist, credentialing, call centers, physician liaison databases. Different departments might have their own spreadsheets that they're keeping, things along those lines. And so the question would then be, well, what does that experience look like for the physician, right? So if you're trying to capture a robust profile of a physician that captures all of the information that would inform a patient on who they should choose and go to, then the physician is the owner of all of that content. So if they're getting hit from 15 different data sources for the same information, that's where they get frustrated, and that's where they stop responding. And so what you want to do is try to look at where are all the data sources, what are the update processes they're all going through, and how can we streamline this down to make the experience for the physician easier, because that ultimately is going to give you the data that you want to be able to have to connect patients to the right doctors, because you're not frustrating the person who's trying to give you that data. So again, analytics are really, really helpful. Now, this graphic here shows you, again, a good point. Number one, you want to make sure that your organization has a good philosophy that we talked about, thinking like an e-commerce site. You want to begin thinking in terms of patient-centered. What does a patient want? What does a patient need to be able to know? So, for example, ratings. A lot of people are getting more and more used to ratings of all sorts of products and services, and physicians are beginning to be in that category as well. And whereas I know a lot of physicians will push back that, hey, you can't rate me like you can a toaster, this is true, but there are ways to accomplish this that are both helpful and satisfactory to the doctors as well as to the consumers who are needing to get this information. Again, starting points, beginning to ask the right questions. Ultimately, the bottom line is, how would you want to be able to be connected to a provider? What information would you want to have, and how are your users currently searching? Analytics will give you some of the answers to those questions. And then finally, the execution, which we'll come back to in another day with another Whiteboard Friday. But the execution piece is going to require somebody who's going to have an ongoing partnership with you, whether that's your IT department, it's a vendor, it's somebody who's a contractor, whoever it may be. You're going to want to have an ongoing partnership with this group, because this is not a once and done effort. So finally, bring it on home. You really want to think about the experience, not the features. The features are supposed to serve the experience for the consumer. And those users' goals, the consumers, patients' goals of being able to find the right physician, this is going to be driven by your experience, whether or not they can accomplish their goals. So, for example, someone who's looking for a pediatrician, if they have a healthy child or a sick child with a chronic condition, their questions are different. So how they're going to reach their goal and the experience they have with your tools are going to be different. You need to know what those different experiences are that you need to provide them with based on developing use cases. Third thing is you can have the analytics for indication. So look at your analytics, be aware of what's happening in your data, because that can inform how you need to start, where you need to focus first, and then what you want to do as a phase 2, 3, 4, and on. And then finally, always, always, always optimize. Just like it's always been said, never, never, never give up. This is an area where you cannot build and abandon. You must be able to continually stay on top of this. So hopefully this was helpful. This will give you an opportunity to be able to set up your program for connecting patients to doctors, specifically through the Find a Doctor tool, but in many other areas as well. So this is Noel Coleman from Connect Healthcare.